Your biggest enemy is probably not your lack of motivation, not your genetics, and not even your discipline. It is your environment. Because most people think that they are making independent decisions when in reality, their environment has already made that decision for them before they can even think. And that's dangerous. Because if you don't understand how your environment controls you, you spend your whole entire life believing that your failures are your own personal flaws, when a lot of that time you're just programmed into those behaviors. Let's be honest. You wake up, check your phone without thinking, eat the same food, talk to the same people, repeat the same routines, consume the same content, and then you wonder why your life never changes. Answer this honestly. How can your life change if your environment never does? Most people don't realize this yet, but your environment isn't just the room that you are in. It is the music that you listen to, the conversations around you, the standards normalized around you, the people that you spend time with, the content that you consume, the expectations placed on you, the energy around you, the systems that are built around you. Your environment silently trains your identity, and identity is what creates behavior. That's why some people say that they want to improve, but they stay in an environment that rewards weakness. They say they want discipline while surrounding themselves with distraction constantly. They say they want confidence while constantly around insecure people who mock growth. They say they want success while spending most of their time around people who normalize mediocrity. Then they wonder why nothing changes. You cannot build a different life while staying emotionally attached to the environment that is creating the current one. That is the truth that nobody wants to hear because it is uncomfortable. People want transformation without separation. They want growth without distance. They want a new identity without leaving the environment that is reinforcing the old one. And that almost never works. Look at school environments, for example. Most schools don't train independent thinking, discipline, leadership, emotional control, or purpose. They train compliance. Sit down when told, move when told, memorize information, repeat it back, wait for permission, avoid standing out, and follow the system. Then people graduate confused why they struggle to think for themselves. It is because their environment always trained dependence. And the same thing happens socially. A guy might actually genuinely want to improve himself. Maybe he starts to work out, reading, building discipline, trying to level up his mindset. But then his friends start making jokes about him. Bro changed. Why are you acting so differently? It's not that serious. Those are not random comments. Those are called environmental pressure. Because when someone changes, it exposes everyone else who refuses to. And weak environments punish growth because growth threatens threatens the comfort of the group. Most people will unconsciously pull you back to the level that they are comfortable at. It isn't because they hate you, it is because your growth creates tension. If you become disciplined, focused, ambitious, self respecting, then everyone around you has two choices either level up or convince themselves that your growth is stupid. And most choose the second option. That is why your environment matters a lot more than motivation. Motivation is temporary while environment is constant. A motivated person in a destructive environment eventually loses. A disciplined environment can carry someone even when motivation disappears. That's why some people improve rapidly after changing cities, friend groups, routines, schools, workplaces, or online spaces. It is not magic. Their environment just stopped reinforcing their old identity. Most people underestimate how automatic human behavior really is. You think that you are choosing your actions cautiously, but most of your life is repetition and conditioning. If every person around you wastes time, you'll normalize wasting time. If everyone around you complains, negativity becomes normal. If everyone around you eats garbage, laziness starts to become normal. If everyone around you avoids discomfort, weakness starts to feel acceptable. Humans adapt to standards, always. And the terrifying part is, adaptations happen silently. You wouldn't notice yourself lowering your standards gradually. Nobody wakes up one day and decides, I want to become average today. It happens slowly. One compromise at a time, one tolerated behavior at a time, one distraction at a time, one excuse at a time, one environment at a time. And that's why protecting your environment is one of the most important things that you could ever do. Because eventually, your environment becomes your future. And social media understands this perfectly. Most people think social media is just entertainment. That is wrong. Social media is environmental engineering. Your feed is literally shaping your thoughts, desires, attention span, emotions, worldview, standards, and identity every single day. Think about this. If you consume content from angry people constantly, you slowly become more angry. If you consume shallow content constantly, your mind becomes more shallow. If you consume hypersexualized content constantly, your brain adapts to overstimulation. If you consume victim minded content constantly, you start seeing yourself as powerless. Your digital environment matters just as much as your physical one now. Maybe even more, because most people spend more time online than in real life. And algorithms are designed to keep you emotionally reactive, distracted, addicted, and consuming, because your attention is profitable. A distracted man is easier to control. A disciplined man is harder to manipulate. That is why building self control today feels harder than ever. You aren't just fighting laziness anymore. You are fighting $1 billion systems engineered to capture your focus. And most people lose without even realizing there's a war happening. That's why you can't approach self improvement casually anymore. Your environment is too strong. You need intentionality. You need structure, standards, systems. Because if you don't consciously design your environment, someone else will design it for you. Companies will, algorithms will, friend groups will, society will. And most of those systems do not care about your growth. They care about comfort, consumption, obedience, and profit. Now, here's the part where people make a mistake. They hear this and they think, so I need to cut everyone off? Not necessarily, but what you do need is honesty. Some relationships are anchors, some environments are poison, some habits are identity traps, and pretending otherwise because you are emotionally attached to it is called weakness. You cannot heal in an environment that is constantly damaging you. You cannot become disciplined in an environment that is rewarding impulsiveness. You cannot become more focused in an environment that is built around distraction. Environment always eventually wins. That's why small environmental changes matter. People overlook this because they want dramatic transformation, but real transformation often starts with small shifts. Cleaning your room, removing distracting apps, changing who you text daily, listening to better conversations, working in different spaces, spending less time around negativity, creating routines, following disciplined people online instead of entertainers. Those things matter a lot more than people think because every environment carries psychological momentum. And momentum shapes behavior. For example, if your room is chaotic, your mind usually feels chaotic. If your phone is filled with distractions, your focus gets destroyed a lot faster. If your closest conversations are gossips, drama, and complaining, your thinking lowers over time. People think that they are mentally strong enough to resist their environment indefinitely. Most aren't. That is just ego. Even strong people absorb what is around them over time. That's why elite athletes train around elite athletes. That's why ambitious people seek ambitious environments. That's why successful communities create more successful people. Humans mirror standards. And one of the most dangerous lies society tells young men today is that the idea that environment doesn't matter if you are mentally strong enough. That is nonsense. Even prisoners become institutionalized by environments. Even soldiers are reshaped by their environment. Even children absorb emotional patterns from their household. Environment is one of the strongest psychological forces in human existence. Ignoring that does not make you stronger, it just makes you naive. Now, here's a deeper layer that most people never think about. Your environment doesn't only shape your habits, it shapes what you believe is possible. Because if nobody around you dreams bigger, takes risks, builds things, grows, leads, or creates, then your brain unconsciously lowers its perception of possibility. You stop aiming high because nobody around you reflects that high standard. Your environment silently defines your ceiling. This is why some people stay trapped for years despite having potential. It isn't because they lack intelligence, it is because they have never been exposed to higher standards consistently enough to internalize them. Exposure changes identity. When you start spending more time around disciplined people, disciplined behavior starts to feel a lot more normal. When you spend time around emotionally mature people, emotional control feels a lot more natural. When you spend time around builders, creators, leaders, thinkers, your brain expands. You realize that your old environment normalized limitations. And this is where a lot of people get uncomfortable. Because growth often requires grieving old environments, old versions of yourself, old friend groups, old routines, old mindsets. People romanticize loyalty too much sometimes. Loyalty to what? A vision of yourself that is destroying your future, a group that encourages stagnation, and an environment that weakens your standards. That is not loyalty. That is only fear of separation. A lot of people stay stuck because they are terrified of becoming different from people that are around them. But if everyone around you is stagnant, becoming different is necessary. You cannot evolve while obsessing over belonging everywhere at the same time. And no, this does not mean arrogance. It doesn't mean that you are thinking that you are better than everyone. That mindset becomes toxic fast. That just means understanding influence. That's it. Everyone is influenced. The question is whether you are being influenced intentionally or unconsciously. Most people unconsciously absorb their environment their whole entire lives. Then they blame themselves for becoming what they were surrounded by. Now, obviously, environment is not an excuse for failure. At some point, responsibility does become yours. You can't spend your whole entire life blaming your circumstances, but pretending environment doesn't matter is equally as delusional. You need both truths simultaneously. Your environment influences you massively, and you are still responsible for changing it. That's adulthood. That's maturity. That's power. Weak people wait for perfect conditions. Strong people create better conditions. And one thing that I have realized personally is that a lot of people secretly sabotage themselves by staying in environments that match their insecurities because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar growth. Think about that. Some people stay around negativity because positivity feels uncomfortable. Some stay around undisciplined people because discipline exposes their excuses. Some stay distracted because silence forces self awareness. Sometimes your environment becomes protection from confronting yourself. Because eventually, your environment doesn't just influence your life, it becomes your identity. That's why people defend toxic habits emotionally, because criticizing their environment feels like criticizing them. They merge with it psychologically. This is why escaping certain environments feel emotionally painful, even when you know that they are bad for you. Your brain associates familiarity with safety, even destructive familiarity. And that is why transformation requires courage, not just motivation. Courage to separate yourselves from environments that no longer align with the person that you want to become. And understand this clearly. Your future self already has a different environment, different conversations, different standards, routines, energy, priorities, different inputs, different expectations, different systems. You cannot become that person while protecting every part of your old identity. Something has to die. That's the part that nobody wants to hear. Transformation is subtraction before addition. You usually don't need more information first. You just need fewer, less destructive influences, less noise, less distraction, less weak conditioning, less emotional chaos, less unconscious consumption. People keep asking, how do I become more disciplined? Start by fixing the environment that is destroying your discipline daily. Because relying on willpower alone is stupid. If your environment constantly triggers weakness, eventually weakness wins. Make discipline easier, make distraction harder. That is intelligence, that is not punishment. And this applies to everything. If you want to focus more, change your environment. Want to think better, change your environment. Want emotional peace, change your environment. Want higher standards, change your environment. Want confidence, change your environment. Because confidence is often built through evidence, and environments determine the evidence that you experience repeatedly. Now listen carefully. You become what you repeatedly experience, not what you occasionally desire. That's why your daily environmental environment matters a lot more than your temporary motivation. And most people are sleepwalking through environments designed to weaken them. Then they wonder why they feel empty, distracted, anxious, lost, and inconsistent. Your environment is either pulling greatness out of you or draining it from you. There is no neutral. Every environment trains something. The question is, what is yours training you to become? Because if your environment trains weakness, distraction, comfort, dependency, insecurity, emotional impulsiveness, laziness, and you stay there long enough, that eventually becomes your identity. It isn't because you are cursed. It isn't because you are incapable. It is because humans adapt. That is what we do. So if you are serious about changing your life, stop only asking, how do I become better? And start asking, what around me keeps making me worse? And that question changes everything. Because the truth is, a lot of people do not need more motivation. They just need a different environment. And until they understand that, they'll keep fighting against systems that are programming them into the same exact person that they are trying to escape from becoming.